My beloved child. Stop scrolling for just a moment, because something happened today that your heart may recognize before your mind can explain it. Somewhere beneath a sky that looked ordinary, the person connected to your soul was moving through an ordinary afternoon, until your name appeared above them in letters so large that the entire world seemed to fall silent. Traffic continued. People kept walking. Lights kept changing. Yet for your soulmate, time stopped. They looked up at that billboard, saw your name, and instantly knew this was not just another passing coincidence. Stay with me, because the part that shook them most was not simply seeing your name. It was the sentence written beside it. They had not planned to take that road. In fact, only moments earlier, they had been traveling in the opposite direction. A meeting had ended sooner than expected, a familiar street was closed, and their navigation suddenly redirected them through a part of the city they rarely visited. They almost ignored the new route. Their hand hovered over the screen, ready to choose another way, but something quiet within them whispered, "Go this way." They could not explain why they listened. They only knew that a strange stillness had entered their heart, as though an unseen presence had stepped into the passenger seat and was guiding them toward a moment already waiting. Do not look away now. Before they reached that billboard, your soulmate had been thinking about you. Not casually. Not as a fading memory that visited and disappeared. They were thinking about the last words left unspoken between you, the questions neither of you had answered, and the feeling they had tried to bury beneath distractions. They had spent days convincing themselves that silence was easier than honesty. But that afternoon, every excuse began to lose its power. Your name had been circling their thoughts from the moment they woke, returning no matter how many times they tried to focus on something else. There was a message sitting unfinished on their phone. They had opened it 3 times that morning. Each time, they typed a few words, stared at them, and erased everything. The first attempt began with, "I know it has been a while." The second began with, "There is something I should have told you." The third was only your name followed by 3 dots. They could not go any further. It was not because they had nothing to say. It was because they had too much to say, and every sentence felt smaller than the truth pressing against their heart. Then came the turn they were never supposed to take. The moment their vehicle entered that unfamiliar street, sunlight broke through the clouds and reflected from the glass buildings ahead. For a second, the brightness made them slow down. When their vision cleared, they looked up, and there it was. Your name, written exactly as they remembered it. The same spelling. The same arrangement of letters they had traced with their eyes countless times on old messages. It appeared across a massive digital billboard, surrounded by a field of deep blue light. Beneath it were 6 words that made their breath catch, "Some truths are meant to return. Stay with me." This is where the story begins. Your soulmate stared so intensely that the sound of the world seemed to move farther away. The name was part of an advertisement, yet they could not immediately understand what was being advertised. There was no recognizable brand, no product, no company logo, only your name and that mysterious sentence. A few seconds later, the billboard changed to another image, but the impression remained. Your name seemed to stay suspended in their vision, glowing like a word written across the inside of their heart. They drove past, but something inside them refused to leave the moment behind. At the next safe opportunity, they turned around. Their hands were trembling, not with fear, but with the force of recognition. They told themselves they only wanted to look again, to prove that their emotions had exaggerated what they had seen. Perhaps the name was slightly different. Perhaps the sentence had another meaning. Perhaps the entire thing was nothing more than an advertisement their longing had transformed into something personal. But deep within, they already knew this explanation would not be enough. When they returned, the billboard displayed a different message. Your name was gone. They waited. One advertisement changed into another. A bright image became a dark one. A smiling face appeared, then a city skyline, then a single white door standing in an empty field. Your soulmate kept watching, counting the seconds, waiting for your name to return. It did not. Drivers behind them continued moving. Pedestrians crossed beneath the towering display without looking up. Everyone else seemed untouched by the moment, as if the sign had been placed there for only one pair of eyes. Then their phone vibrated. It was not a message from you. It was a memory notification containing a photograph from a day your soulmate had tried hard to forget. The picture showed a place connected to both of you, somewhere ordinary that had become sacred because of what was shared there. Perhaps it was a cafe, a street corner, a quiet park, or a room filled with laughter. But what mattered was the detail your soulmate noticed in the background. Behind you, barely visible in the photograph, was another billboard. And across that older billboard were the words, "The beginning is closer than you think." Their chest tightened. The coincidence now felt layered, deliberate, almost impossible to dismiss. First, your name appeared above the road with a message about truths returning. Then a forgotten photograph surfaced from the exact period when their heart had first recognized you. The older message had spoken about a beginning. The new message spoke about a return. Two moments separated by time were suddenly answering one another. But this was only the first revelation. Earlier that morning, before anyone else was awake, your soulmate had stood near a window and whispered a private request into the silence. They did not use perfect words. They did not know whether they were praying, hoping, or speaking to their own heart. They simply said, "If this connection still matters, show me something I cannot explain away. Let me see their name somewhere I would never expect it." They told no one about that request. They had almost forgotten making it by the time they entered that unfamiliar street. But the instant they saw your name above them, every word returned. That was why they could not dismiss the billboard as ordinary. The sign had answered the exact question they had asked only hours earlier. Your answer is closer than you think, but there is another detail that changes the meaning of everything. The prayer did not end with a request for your name. Your soulmate added one more sentence. They whispered, "And if I am meant to speak, let the message mention returning." Now you understand why those 6 words beneath your name left them speechless. Some truths are meant to return. For several moments, they sat completely still. They remembered every time they had doubted the bond between you. They remembered the nights when they almost reached out and stopped themselves. They remembered trying to convince their heart that what was real could simply be forgotten. Yet here was the very sign they had requested, carrying the very word they had chosen in private. Something within them softened. The walls they had spent so long building did not collapse all at once, but the first crack appeared. My child, pause here and feel the depth of what this moment revealed. Your soulmate's silence was never empty. Behind it lived a struggle they rarely allowed anyone to see. They were not only afraid that you had moved on, they were afraid that you still cared. Because if your heart still held space for them, then they would have to face how much time had been lost to hesitation. They would have to admit that distance had not protected them. It had only taught them the weight of your absence. There were mornings when they reached for their phone before remembering that the two of you no longer spoke the way you once did. There were songs they skipped because a single melody could reopen an entire season. There were places they avoided because those places seemed to remember you. They became skilled at appearing fine, yet a small part of them remained turned toward the possibility of you. They did not call it hope. Hope felt too vulnerable. They called it unfinished business, curiosity, nostalgia, anything except the truth. But your name on that billboard stripped those safer words away. They whispered your name aloud. At first, it was barely audible. Then they said it again, with the tenderness of someone returning a precious object to the light. Hearing it in their own voice affected them more deeply than they expected. It reminded them of the first time they had spoken about you to someone they trusted. Back then, they had tried to sound casual, but their eyes had revealed everything. The person listening had smiled and said, "You say that name differently." Your soulmate remembered denying it. Now, beneath that enormous billboard, they could no longer deny anything. Do not skip, because what happened next was not visible on the screen above them. It happened within them. A memory surfaced, one they had kept hidden even from themselves. There had been a moment between you when they nearly confessed how deeply they felt. You may remember a pause in a conversation, a sudden change in their expression, or a sentence they started but never completed. They wanted to tell you that your presence felt familiar in a way they could not explain. They wanted to say that meeting you had made their future seem less like an empty road and more like a place they might finally want to reach. But they stopped. They chose a smaller sentence because the larger truth felt overwhelming. Perhaps they said, "I care about you," when they meant, "You have changed the rhythm of my life." Perhaps they said, "I will miss you," when they meant, "I do not know how to return to who I was before you." Perhaps they said nothing at all. That unfinished confession had remained between you like a sealed letter. Today, your name on the billboard broke the seal. Your soulmate opened the unfinished message again. This time, they did not erase the first line. They wrote, "I saw your name today, and I need to tell you what happened." Their thumb hovered above the send button. The message was simple, but behind it stood every emotion they had hidden. They imagined your reaction. Would you believe them? Would you think it was merely an excuse to return? Would you read the message and remain silent? The uncertainty made them hesitate, yet for the first time, hesitation felt more painful than honesty. Before they could press send, the billboard changed again. The blue light returned. Your name did not appear this time. Instead, there was a phrase that only the two of you would fully understand. It was connected to an old conversation, a private promise, or a sentence spoken during one of your most meaningful moments together. To everyone else, it looked like ordinary advertising language. To your soulmate, it was unmistakable. It echoed words you had once said when they were uncertain about themselves: "You do not have to know the whole path to take one honest step." The billboard displayed a shortened version: "Take the honest step." Your soulmate covered their mouth as emotion rose within them. The sign no longer seemed connected only to their morning prayer. It now seemed connected to you, to something you had once given them without realizing how long it would remain. Your words had returned at the exact moment they needed courage. Not as a command, not as pressure, but as a mirror. They were being shown the difference between waiting for certainty and choosing sincerity. And there is something you must understand. The sign was not promising that every question would be answered immediately. It was revealing that avoidance had reached its end. Your soulmate could remain silent, but silence would no longer feel neutral. It would be a choice. They could speak, and speaking would not guarantee the outcome they imagined, but it would restore truth to a place where fear had been making decisions. The spiritual presence around them seemed to deepen. In this cinematic vision, Archangel Michael stood not with a voice of alarm, but with a quiet strength that filled the space around your soulmate's heart. The message was clear: courage is not the absence of uncertainty. Courage is the moment love refuses to hide behind it. Your soulmate felt those words without hearing them aloud. They looked at the message they had written to you and added another sentence: I asked for a sign this morning. I asked to see your name, and I asked for the word return. Both appeared together. Still, they did not send it. Stay with me, because their hesitation had a deeper reason, one they had not admitted. During the time apart, someone close to them had repeatedly encouraged them to leave the past untouched. This person was not cruel. They believed they were protecting your soulmate from disappointment. They said things like, if it was meant to work, it would have happened already, and, do not reopen a chapter that caused you confusion. Your soulmate listened because those sentences sounded logical. But logic without the whole truth can become a hiding place, and this person did not know what had actually happened between you. They did not know about the apology your soulmate never delivered. They did not know that the distance began because your soulmate misunderstood something you said. They did not know how pride transformed one uncertain moment into weeks, then months, of silence. Most importantly, they did not know that your soulmate had discovered the misunderstanding later, and still lacked the courage to correct it. That is the second major truth being revealed. Your soulmate learned long ago that the reason they pulled away was not what they had believed. A conversation reached them through someone else, or a forgotten detail finally became clear, and they realized that you had not rejected them. You had been protecting your own heart. The coldness they thought they saw in you was actually disappointment. The distance they interpreted as indifference was your attempt to stop chasing someone who would not meet you halfway. When they understood this, they felt ashamed. Not because they were unworthy of forgiveness, but because they had allowed assumption to speak louder than love. They wanted to contact you then, yet the longer they waited, the harder the first sentence became. Days formed a wall. Time added height to it. Eventually, they began telling themselves that perhaps silence was the kinder choice. But silence was never kind to either of you. The billboard made that impossible to ignore. A city bus passed between your soulmate and the sign, briefly blocking their view. Across the side of the bus was another word, now. It was part of an unrelated advertisement, but its timing struck them with almost humorous precision. Your soulmate let out a breath that was half laugh, half surrender. The entire afternoon seemed to be answering their resistance with quiet persistence. They looked upward and whispered, I understand. Yet heaven's message was not, rush without thought. It was, stop pretending you do not know what your heart is asking you to face. There is a difference. Real spiritual courage does not force, manipulate, or demand. It invites honesty. It reminds you that love cannot grow where truth is continually postponed. Your soulmate finally pressed the screen, but not the send button. Instead, they opened their voice recorder. They believed that written words might hide the emotion in their voice. They wanted you to hear the pauses, the sincerity, and the truth they could no longer compress into a few careful lines. Their first recording lasted 11 seconds. They deleted it. The second lasted nearly a minute. They deleted that too. On the third attempt, they closed their eyes and began with your name. I do not know whether you expected to hear from me, they said, but something happened today that I cannot keep to myself. Their voice shook slightly. Then they told the story of the morning prayer, the changed route, the billboard, and the exact phrase beneath your name. They admitted that they had been thinking of you long before seeing it. They admitted that the sign did not create the feelings, it revealed the feelings they had been hiding. And then, after a long silence, they spoke the sentence that had been waiting inside them for far longer than you know. I did not stay away because I stopped caring. I stayed away because I cared enough to be afraid of what your answer might mean. They stopped recording. The message was more than 4 minutes long. Your soulmate listened to the beginning but could not bear to hear the rest. Their own honesty sounded unfamiliar, almost like the voice of the person they had been before fear taught them to edit every feeling. They saved the recording without sending it. Then they placed the phone beside them and looked again at the billboard. That is when they noticed someone standing beneath it. An older person had paused on the sidewalk and was looking up with the same intensity. Your soulmate watched as this stranger took a photograph of the display. But the billboard was showing an ordinary image now, not your name. Confused, your soulmate stepped out and approached them. They asked, "Did you see the message that was there a few minutes ago?" The stranger smiled as though the question was expected. "I saw a name," they replied. Your soulmate's heart accelerated. "What name?" The stranger spoke your name correctly. For one suspended second, everything went still again. Your soulmate asked whether the stranger knew you. The stranger shook their head. They explained that they had been walking past when the billboard changed. Something about the name made them stop, although they did not know why. They photographed it because the sentence beneath it felt meaningful. When your soulmate asked to see the picture, the stranger opened their phone. There was your name. There were the words, "Some truths are meant to return." And in the lower corner of the billboard, nearly invisible from the road, was a small line neither of them had noticed before: "The message arrives when the listener is ready. Do not look away now, because the photograph contains something else." Reflected in the glass of a building beside the billboard was the image of your soulmate's vehicle. The timestamp showed the exact minute they arrived. This mattered because the stranger had taken the picture before your soulmate remembered seeing the sign. According to the timestamp, the display had changed to your name at the precise moment your soulmate turned onto that road. Not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. It was as though the sign had been waiting for their arrival. The stranger sent the photograph to them and said something your soulmate would remember for a long time: "Sometimes we ask for a sign because we want permission to admit what we already know." Then the stranger walked away. Your soulmate remained beneath the billboard, holding the photograph on their screen. They enlarged the image and studied every detail. Your name filled the display. Their vehicle appeared in the reflection. The hidden sentence rested in the corner. Everything about it felt too exact. Yet the mystery was about to deepen, because when they looked up the campaign information printed at the bottom, they recognized the name of the company responsible for the display. It was connected to someone from their past. Years earlier, before the two of you met, your soulmate had known a person who worked in public advertising. They had not spoken in a long time, but the company name was unmistakable. Your soulmate searched through old contacts and found the number. For several moments, they considered calling. Then they stopped, unsettled by the possibility that the billboard had not been random at all. What if someone had arranged it? What if the sign had a human explanation? Would that make it less meaningful, or would it reveal an even larger truth? This is where many people would have turned away, choosing the mystery that felt comforting instead of pursuing the answer that might be complicated. But something had shifted in your soulmate. The billboard had not merely stirred emotion, it had awakened determination. If truth was returning, they wanted all of it, not only the part that felt beautiful. They called the old contact. The number rang twice before someone answered. The voice belonged to the person they remembered, older now but unmistakable. There was surprise, then warmth, then the usual exchange people make when time has passed. Your soulmate did not know how to introduce the real reason for calling, so they asked directly, "Does your company manage the digital billboard on the Eastern Avenue near the glass buildings?" The person said yes. Your soulmate's fingers tightened around the phone. They described the advertisement and asked which campaign it belonged to. There was silence on the other end. The contact requested the exact time. Your soulmate gave it. More silence followed, this time longer. Faint keyboard sounds could be heard as the person searched their system. Finally, the contact said, "There was no advertisement scheduled with that name." Your soulmate looked at the photograph again. "I have proof. Someone else saw it too." The contact asked them to send the picture. They sent it. While waiting, your soulmate returned to the voice recording meant for you. Their finger hovered over it again. They had asked for a sign and received one, yet now a different question was rising. Perhaps the true sign was not the billboard itself. Perhaps it was everything the billboard forced them to confront, the misunderstanding, the apology, the unfinished confession, and the fact that your name could still rearrange their entire inner world. Archangel Michael's presence entered the story once more like a steady light. "Do not worship the sign," the message seemed to say. Understand what it illuminated. And what had it illuminated? That your soulmate still carried your place within them. That the silence between you had been built from fear, not absence of feeling. That the truth they avoided was ready to be spoken. And that you, too, may have sensed the connection moving beneath the surface, even on days when nothing visible seemed to change. There may have been moments recently when your thoughts turned toward them without an obvious reason. Perhaps you remembered a conversation in unusual detail. Perhaps their face entered your mind while you were doing something completely unrelated. Perhaps you felt an emotion that seemed to arrive from somewhere beyond your immediate surroundings. Within this fictional spiritual story, those moments were not presented as instructions to wait helplessly. They were reminders to remain open without abandoning your own peace. Your path has never depended on someone else finding courage. You were never meant to pause your entire life until another person understood your value. The deeper message is that what belongs in truth must approach you through truth. It cannot require you to shrink, chase, or prove that you are worthy of being chosen. If your soulmate returns, they must return with clarity, not with another riddle, another half-promise, or another door left slightly open. This is the third major revelation. The billboard was a sign for them, but the lesson unfolding around it is also protection for you. You have been learning not to mistake intensity for consistency. You have been learning that spiritual connection and emotional responsibility must walk together. A bond may feel extraordinary, but it must still be treated with care. Your heart can recognize someone deeply while also requiring honesty from them. Forgiveness can exist without forgetting your needs. Hope can remain alive without becoming a cage. Your soulmate did not know how much you had changed during the silence. They imagined you exactly as you were during your last meaningful conversation. They did not see the nights when you rebuilt yourself. They did not witness the small decisions through which you recovered your confidence. They did not know how many times you almost sent a message and chose instead to protect your peace. They had been afraid of facing the person they remembered, unaware that they would now be facing someone stronger. That realization came to them unexpectedly. While waiting for the Billboard contact to respond, your soulmate opened one of your old photographs. They had seen it many times, but now they noticed your expression differently. There was tenderness in your eyes, but there was also strength. You had cared, yet you had not been asking to be rescued. You had only wanted reciprocity. You had wanted them to stand beside the truth instead of leaving you alone inside it. Your soulmate whispered, "You deserved better from me." Those words marked another turning point. Until then, they had been focused on whether you might receive them. Now they began thinking about what they needed to take responsibility for. A genuine return could not begin with, "I saw a sign, so you must accept me." It had to begin with, "I understand what my silence cost you, and I am ready to listen." They reopened the voice recording and made a fourth attempt. This time, they did not explain the billboard immediately. They began with the apology. They named the misunderstanding. They admitted what they had assumed. They explained when they discovered the truth and why they still hesitated. They did not blame timing, circumstances, or other people. They said, "I let fear make a decision that honesty should have made." Then they spoke about the sign. They told you they were not sending it to pressure you. They were sending it because the moment had finally given them the courage to tell the whole truth. "You do not owe me an immediate answer," they said. "But you deserved the words I should have given you long ago." The recording ended at 7 minutes and 7 seconds. They stared at the length, noticing the repeating number. A small smile appeared through their emotion. Not because the number guaranteed anything, but because the entire day seemed filled with patterns inviting them to pay attention. They attached the recording to your unfinished message. Still, they waited. Stay till the final moment, because what prevented them from sending it was not another wave of fear. Their phone rang. It was the Billboard contact calling back. Your soulmate answered immediately. The person's voice had changed. The casual warmth was gone, replaced by focused confusion. They said their team had checked the schedule, the backup system, and the display records. According to every official log, the Billboard had been showing an advertisement for a travel company at that exact time. Your name and the sentence did not appear anywhere in the campaign files. Yet the photograph clearly showed otherwise. The contact asked whether the image had been edited. Your soulmate said no and explained that a stranger had taken it. The metadata still showed the original time and location. The person on the phone became quiet again. Then they said something even stranger, "The layout looks familiar." They searched through archived designs. Minutes passed. Your soulmate watched the Billboard cycle through ordinary advertisements while listening to the faint sound of files opening on the other end. Finally, the contact inhaled sharply. They had found the layout. It was not part of any current campaign. It came from an unfinished concept designed several years earlier for a project that was never released. The deep blue background, the placement of the name, and the phrase about truths returning all matched. But there was one impossible difference. The old concept did not contain your name. It contained a blank space. The design had been created so a name could be inserted later, but the project was cancelled before any name was chosen. The file had remained archived and untouched. It had never been approved, uploaded, or scheduled. There should have been no way for it to appear on the Billboard. Your soulmate asked the obvious question: who created the original design? The contact did not answer immediately. Instead, they asked, do you remember the winter before you met this person? Your soulmate's face changed. That winter carried a private story they rarely discussed. It had been a season of loneliness and transformation, a time when they wrote down the qualities they hoped one day to find in someone. They had not written a physical description. They had written about how they wanted love to feel: peaceful but alive, gentle but honest, familiar but still capable of wonder. At the bottom of that page, they had added one unusual sentence: when this person arrives, let their name find me twice. They had forgotten those words completely. The Billboard contact could not have known about the page. No one did. Your soulmate had folded it and placed it inside a book that remained unopened for years. Yet the question about that winter returned the memory with stunning clarity. First, your name had found them when the two of you met. Now, it had found them again across the sky. Twice. Your soulmate felt tears gather, not tears of sadness, but the release that comes when a long-hidden part of the heart is finally acknowledged. They understood that the sign was not a promise of a perfect outcome. It was an invitation to stop living as though the connection had meant nothing. Whatever came next, truth deserved its moment. They pressed the send button. The voice message began uploading. For the first time that day, your soulmate felt calm. They were no longer negotiating with their courage. They had chosen honesty. A small circle moved across the screen as the recording prepared to leave their phone and travel toward you. 10%. 25%. 40%. Then the upload stopped. A notification appeared: message not delivered. Your soulmate checked the connection. Their signal was strong. They tried again. The same result appeared. They copied the text into a new conversation, but before they could attach the recording, another message arrived, from the Billboard contact. It contained a scanned image from the archived design folder. The file showed the original Billboard concept, created years before your soulmate ever knew you. The background was the same. The sentence was the same. The blank space for a name was still visible. But beneath the design was a handwritten note. The contact zoomed in and sent a clearer copy. Your soulmate read the note once. Then again. Their face lost all color as recognition moved through them, because the handwriting belonged to someone they knew, someone who had once told them, long before you entered their life, that one day a name would appear and change everything. The note said, "Do not publish this until the right name returns." Your soulmate immediately called the contact back and asked who had placed that instruction inside the file. The answer came quietly. "That is what I have been trying to tell you," the person said. "The designer left the company years ago, but before leaving, they gave me a sealed envelope connected to this billboard. I was told never to open it unless the display somehow activated on its own." Your soulmate could barely speak. "Did it have a name on it?" "Yes," the contact replied. "Whose name?" There was a pause, followed by the sound of paper being lifted. "Your name is on the front," the contact whispered. "But the name written inside the envelope is theirs." And just before the call ended, the person added one final sentence that changed the meaning of the entire afternoon. "There is also a date written beneath both names, and that date is tomorrow."